Oh, thank you, Charnay, who just uplifted and welcomed everyone into the room, reminding us all of our icebreaker, welcome in the room question, which is, what is the one thing you've done in the past few months that you never expected to do? So as you'll come to the space and start to populate that, I'm going to move us into the presentation or into the session, but I encourage you all to keep the conversation flowing, sort of opens your minds a little bit if we can engage you and welcome you into this space. So today, I'm going to minimize my chat box. So I might not be able to see everyone as I go, because otherwise I can't see the screen. So I'm going to ask my fellow from others on the team to keep looking at that chat box and keep it flowing until we take turns. But we're talking about tactics, tips, and togetherness, leading and learning. And the focus today is on fun development. And we have a great session for you. And we welcome your participation to make it great. So as I mentioned, we're going to use that chat box to send questions. Keep communicating with us. There's several of us here from the new and COAC teams, and we're here to continue to keep the conversation flowing. Let us know who you are. It makes it so much easier, and how you want to be referred to within the naming. If you have any questions of how to name yourself, just let us know. We can certainly help you out with that. Just give us a shout out on the chat box, but let us know who you are. We will, we ask you to mute yourself, and then if you want to speak, we'll provide some opportunities to engage the conversation. It's short, we don't have long, so we'll try to keep the conversation flowing, keep the videos on, and if you want to see who the speaker is, use the speaker view. I'm sure by now we've had these tips for a bit. I presume a lot of us have had some more familiarity with Zoom, but it's always good to remind ourselves how we can help. So we'll be coming in. This is our agenda for the today. We'll come in, we'll let you know what's coming at you. We'll introduce our fantastic speakers and such. I'll review the norms and just ground us in why we're here today. I'm coming in, if you've been here for previous sessions, Judy Munn, my colleague, is normally the person who plays this role. She is, she's out of the office for a couple days. So I'm taking in that space. And then we will provide an opportunity for all of us to have some questions and answers throughout the day. So fear not, we like to make this engaging and interactive and meaningful from you. And we really appreciate the opportunities to learn with and from you as well. So that's how we're going to spend our time this morning. Let me keep that going. So if you are new to new, just a brief reminder who we are. We're an organization been around for over 25 years, a nonprofit based out of Ann Arbor, and we seek to improve the impact and performance of our fellow nonprofits by working alongside you, the leaders, to create high quality strategic solutions to advance your mission in our communities. And we do this through a number of different ways, providing resources and opportunities to connect and convene is just one of those ways. So this program, along with many of other programs, are ways that we seek to empower leaders to help to support flourishing nonprofits and in support of vibrant communities. So that bottom line there is our vision for the future. I'm going to keep us moving along, and I also want to uplift the fact that we are doing this in partnership with our fantastic team at COAC as well, and so we'll have an opportunity to uplift some of their upcoming programs towards the end of this program as well. So norms, we'll ask, as always, grace and patience and understanding. If we run into technical glitches, please be understanding on our part. We will start and end on time. We got it. Y'all have busy days. We'll ask you to practice self-care, to get up, move around, welcome your kids and pets into the space. This is see my boss Yodit has her puppy on her lap. So we all come into this and it brings a smile to the rest of our faces. And that's always a good thing. And we know that's how we're going to roll in this environment. We ask you, if you're here, engage, be active, practice deep listening, and be fully present in this space and in this time. So that may mean just take a break from your email, take a break from what's coming at you the rest of the day. Be here in this moment right now. As we're going along, we're going to rely on that chat feature because it's such a short time. So unless we open up and ask for questions, we'll ask you to at least just prompt us, let us know about what's going on in your mind, your questions with chat, and we'll bring your voice into the room and then offer opportunities for you to speak up. And if there's something that doesn't feel right, embrace that moment, lean in with a sense of curiosity and seeking deeper understanding. And why we're here, this is unfortunately our last of our series for Leading and Learning for this time, but we have set this program for a number of reasons. We had 5 different series to increase the connectedness in this time when we're all apart, really trying to bring folks together across Southeast Michigan. And we're hoping that this is an opportunity for us to provide some wisdom, resources, and support to you as leaders as you're in this space during this unique time, who are still managing nonprofit operations, teams, and programs. We hope that this has been a way to bring a sense of togetherness, camaraderie, and trust among all of you. And we really want this to be an opportunity to provide some actionable items. That means that we bring in some experts who bring some wisdom, but you yourselves have tried out some awesome ideas. And when you share those amongst each other, we all benefit as the community does as well. And with that, I turn things over to Yodit to bring us into the next part of our program.
Thanks, Carrie. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see your faces. And, you know, part of Leading and Learning was about being together. It was disrupting this myth that the leader has to be lonely. And I don't know about you all, but I did not have leading through a pandemic on my job description as a brand new CEO. So part of Leading and Learning was me saying, I need y'all. And as I look at your faces, and those of you who have joined us on a number of occasions, there is that sense that we're not in it alone. And Susan, I want to say, I can't imagine. My biggest fear when we went into this was that I would experience what you've had to experience. So my heart's with you. And any of us that are worth our weight, we're really focused on our teams, right? And you need the fund development piece. So in my case, I reached out to funders and said, we need to pull ahead grants because our consulting business, we could no longer meet with folks in person. We could no longer host programming. Carrie's program, no fault of her own, we saw about 80% of our revenue go out of the door in the first 30 days. And so we were having some conversations with funders that were very raw and real. I imagine you were as well. And we really thought today's conversation with Will and also with Amy were really important. So let me just tee up. Amy's has extensive organizational development experience, including raising almost $50 million since 2000. She's a graduate of Michigan State. I think Will is too, so we got a lot of Go Green on the call. She's currently serving as a senior director of individual giving for Michigan State and has extensive past with health systems, the Opera Theater, even the Community Foundation. She's also the president of the Junior League of Detroit and part-time faculty at Oakland University. And then Will, our relationship manager, my partner, serves as a liaison for us between not just our funding partners, but with you, the community. I think I was noticing how familiar he is with all of you. And if you know Will, he spent a lot of time in our community getting to know nonprofits and really evangelizing your great work through our Facebook pages and other media outlets. And Will comes to this work with a couple degrees, one at EMU, most recently his MBA, and he started with NEW as our program coordinator and really gained firsthand insight into the needs of nonprofits, which I think is informing his role. I'm really proud to have him here and for us to be with you this morning. I hope you'll have a great session. Carrie lifted up why we're here, and I think I covered that as well. This idea that we could learn some tactical tools and tips together, and then that we could also develop relationship and rapport so that hopefully we're reaching out to one another, working with one another to build up our organizations and our community.
Yodit, I think I accidentally hit it backwards, so I'll keep us moving in a forward direction instead.
Thanks a lot, Carrie.
There we go. So those are our speakers, and there we are.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to kind of share some impressions and thoughts on fundraising. And again, like everyone had shared at the beginning when we brought this thing together, it's about dialogue. It's about where you are in this space. And so wanted to just kind of share some impressions about what I'm seeing happening in the respective fundraising world that we all live in. And then hopefully kind of put some thoughts and things that hopefully you've already been doing, but if not, hopefully it can be some actionable items that you can kind of think about. So as I look at the fundraising piece, and thank you for the kind introduction, a lot of the work that I have done has been in all the major spaces of aspects of fundraising, from annual giving to our major gifts individuals and our grants and corporate sponsors. My thought behind when I put these two kind of slides together, the premise of this was really just hopefully right now, in the last 2.5 months, you've been able to do kind of an internal perspective of what's happening related to fundraising. And so depending on where you are within your organization, hopefully these are things that have already been coming to the forefront, things that you've already been assessing, and things that you are currently assessing as you move into how we live in this COVID/pandemic space for the near term as well as in the long term. And so I present more of kind of a macro perspective of how we're going into this work, and Will complements that space in terms of what can we do now as it relates to your organization. And so again, hopefully this is a dialogue. This is an opportunity for you to kind of reflect onto your own organizations and how you're looking at that. So I just ask that hopefully you're doing a pulse check on your fundraising and the things that you have within your organization. I look at in terms of your priorities, and many organizations are doing this right now, particularly depending how the year looks. We're in 6 months of the 2020. We're thinking of how we're looking at the next 6 months, even into the next year, fiscal and calendar years. And I bring that up only because some organizations, a fiscal and a calendar year are the same time frame, and sometimes they're not. And so depending on how those organizations operate, some of them are coming out of fiscal years. Michigan State University is a June 30th end fiscal year, and we go into a new fiscal year come July 1st. So technically we're year end, right? But calendar is a December 31st year. So again, how do you balance those out, especially from a fundraising perspective? There are some organizations that will use their fundraise to invest into next year's fiscal programming. And if that's the case for you, what have you done as an organization to control some of those things? How are you anticipating some of those changes for your organization? And for some of us, we're looking at, we were able to control what we were spending when we had to go into a stay-at-home order and that we couldn't do some face-to-face. But in essence, a lot of the organizations that I've interfaced with, a lot of our work, especially in fundraising, is very face-to-face, very large events, large touch points where we see people. And so that came to a halt pretty fast for a lot of organizations in Southeast Michigan. And so again, what can we control into that space? Many organizations that I know that are happening in Southeast Michigan have decided to halt, right? To just kind of put a pause, if that's possible, to their fundraising events. Some of them have decided that they're going to cancel, right? It's the right thing to do in the current environment. We don't have alternatives yet, but we're working on those, right? But again, we're living in a situation, all of us, not knowing what that next iteration looks like for our own respective workplaces, as well as what it looks like for our community, right? And where are people going to feel comfortable? And I've had conversations with donors who some of them feel that they're ready, they're desiring of this, wanting to connect with people and wanting to get back into the things that gave them joy. And so being with their nonprofit and interfacing with the good things that their nonprofits are doing has been a desire, but the nonprofit might not be ready for that. So again, what do we control in relation to our own respective organizations, but at the same time, what is happening out in the greater community that we can make sure that is relatively within the realms of what is comfortable. And so I think that's a thing that we have to kind of take a pulse on what is that piece of it. The other point that I make is about the current resources. These 3 points, annual giving, major gifts, and grants, I look at it as a three-legged stool, and hopefully most organizations are having those. These are probably, I would say, as the sources of revenue, fundraising revenue for the organization. The reality is that many organizations might have 2 out of the 3 legs of the stool. They might be building up to one of those pieces of the stool. But I think what has come to the forefront during this pandemic is that if your organization was heavily relying on annual giving and maybe just grants and foundations, and you didn't have kind of a starting base for some major individual gifts for your organization, it's kind of put you at a point where you realize there should be some work to be built with that organization. So just in case, and I throw events under annual giving where we had to halt, we had to stop, and we had to no longer meet, and we can't do that. So where is that other source going to come from? And so hopefully these other pegs of the stool can help sustain the organization from an interim or even a long-term perspective until those things can kind of work itself out. And I think the other piece of it is that what do we prioritize in the immediate future? Because I think some of the things that we think about is that I've canceled my event, but what am I going to do in the interim? You know, do I have annual appeals? Am I still making calls to action on my newsletters? What am I communicating to my donors, right? So that's the other thing. I think there's been this desire or thinking that I need to inwardly think, but you also have to exwardly think about your own organization and what are you doing to communicate what you're still doing with your organization. And I love how New has brought in this series to make them current and available as a resource for the nonprofit community, because these are tools that we can use together, right? And how we talk about it takes a village. It does take a village, especially in our nonprofit space, to help support each other in this collective pandemic that we're all in, right? And so how do we look at some of those pieces in our respective fundraising that we can control, that we prioritize, and that we move together? And I think one of the things that we struggle with, and I say we as a collective, as nonprofits, is that we think of our donors, and we think of we're dealing with crisis, and then therefore we're thinking they're dealing with crisis. And that's not necessarily the case, right? And so we don't want to, quote unquote, burden them or talk about the things that we're struggling with because we're afraid to let them know that we need their help, right? And we need their help from a fundraising perspective. We need their help from an investment perspective. And that's really sometimes the surprise, is that they're at different points in their own personal situation with what's been happening, but they want to help. And so why are our nonprofit organizations making those decisions on behalf of our donors, right? And we shouldn't. So we should make those conversations and help them communicate what we're doing in that space. So again, I put that out there as, don't make the decisions for the donor. Share what you're doing, share the good work that you continue to do and will be doing in the future, because that's what they want to know. They want to know you're going to be relevant here. They want to know that you're going to be around. So again, those are pieces that I think are very important for us to, for organizations to kind of really look at and be able to kind of prioritize. Carrie, if you don't mind going on to that next slide. Thanks. So I put this image out here for us to kind of look at, and again, kind of transitioning into what are we looking in terms of our own organization and our own respective fundraising relationships. I like the image of the pebble, throwing a pebble in the water, and then it has that ripple effect. I hope you look at your organizations as the ripple effect in terms of how you're maintaining those relationships as it relates to fundraising. Obviously, the core is the nonprofit organization and everything that's related around the mission and the vision of why the organization exists. But then you start to look at the externals ripples that come out. And I think some of us go directly to, you know, who should we be contacting to our prospects or the greater community, and forget that we need to start to look inward, right? And to the important people that really have built this organization and built the nonprofit organization. Staff, and I just saw in the chat before we came on board that some people have had to make the hard decision about furloughing or laying off temporarily, and that's a tough call. And again, it's a challenge that we have to go through in terms of budgets, but hopefully this is only temporary, and this is a space that you can still continue the good work of the mission of the organization. The second piece I always look at is our board, and hopefully your board has been steady and stalwart in the relationship to the organization. And they have been supportive of all the continued work in this space. And I know sometimes that might be a struggle for the board to understand why we have to make some hard decisions. But at the same time, hopefully the board is also stepping up in their own philanthropic support of the organization. In the courses that I teach, when I talk about board development, I hope that many of the boards or the people you onboard, there's a giving component to being on the board. And if not, it should be a consideration and a conversation you might want to start to think about, because your board is the best people who, granted, they might have a title, they might have an experience that they're bringing to the nonprofit, but they also have resources that they can bring to the nonprofit. And so again, hopefully there's a giving component that your board members are giving to you, and that they are they are the connectors for your organization to potential donors, to potential funders, to all aspects of the community. The other group that I talk about is your volunteers. And right now, depending on the type of organization and the type of programming that you have, your volunteers might kind of have been put on pause right now, right? They can't be physically at a facility. They can't interface with program staff. They can't do the things that they would typically do prior to things stay-at-home orders per the state. But what they are is your marketing and your PR people, and they are the people that you should be in communication about, still sharing the good work and helping them tell their stories about why they still support your nonprofit. The other thing with our volunteers is I think we also get into this assumption building of they give us our time, they give us their expertise, but we don't ask them for financial contributions. I think that's an amiss, because they're the best people to know the ins and out of your organization. They're the ones who will make a gift if asked. And I think that becomes the point, is that you need to ask, right? And so if anything, when we learn about fundraising in general, it's about asking, right? So you can't make those assumptions. And then lastly, it's about our donors, right? And so in the space that I'm in at Michigan State University, one of the things that we think about is that we've built some of those assumptions by them. We feel like they're going through their own personal crisis, or we find out that, you know, they're either furloughed or they're laid off, or things are happening, or we don't want to make decisions on their behalf, so we choose not to contact them. But that's been the opposite. So we've actually made a concerted effort to connect with them. And it's not necessarily about making a gift back to the university, but it's just checking in, seeing how they're doing, how they're dealing with the things that they're dealing with. And some of them, we were in active gift conversations with them, and we still are, even during this time frame, because things have changed for them in different ways. They've pivoted into some things where they've had resources, and then they're feeling that they want to do something. So, right. So particularly for students, a lot of them lost jobs, summer internships, they lost things that they could no longer do, right? And so they felt they wanted to help. Another thing was our students, believe it or not, didn't have the technology resources when they went back home. So they didn't have access to internet. They didn't have access to technology. So when they had to go back online for classes, they didn't have that. So we created a fund that the students could access so they could get that. So again, it's our donors wanted to do that. So again, it just reiterates, don't make the decision on behalf of your donors based on your organization because of what's happening. There is this desire and need to want to help. So give them the opportunity to make that choice, and don't make that choice on their behalf. So that's the kind of takeaway I want to build up on it. And then you look at your prospects in your greater community. Prospects, I think I deem them as people that you want to get close to, but you're not quite there. But maybe your staff, your donors, your volunteers, your boards have those potentials to make those relationships. This might be a time, you know, we're in a pause time, and sometimes that we are not doing our typical program that we would typically do with our nonprofit. But here's a time to kind of talk to these prospects, right? You, again, making the assumption that we can't contact them, but maybe it just might be a greater time to contact them. And then the greater community. Hopefully your communications have still continued with your organization. You're sharing things that are pretty relevant. Again, if programs not happening, but what kind of good stories can you tell? And that's what we're doing too, is that what good stories can we tell about the work that we're doing through social media, through our newsletters, through touch points that we talk to our donors, because they want to know that. And it's been sometimes and sometimes this time alone where we've not had to been out doing things or working our next event and turning over the next event that we have to do or the next engagement. We've had time to do a lot of more communication to our greater community, and it's been interesting to see the response that we're getting. And people want to know more because we're still doing good stuff. And so again, don't dismiss what the mission and vision of the organization is, because you have great stories to tell. And those stories, people want to support those stories. So, so that's kind of what I wanted to put together. And I know Will's going to make that transition to really kind of talk about how do you build those relationships in the current state that we're in, and how do we kind of make those connections. So I'm going to put a pause. I know there's a dialogue question there, and I'd love it to leave it for Carrie to kind of manage that. Thank you.
So we'll drop this question into the chat box, but I'll
Thank
read it
you.
over. You got it,
Yeah.
Carrie?
Yeah. Just had to find the unmute there. So thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. Yeah, we want to offer up, how are all of you thinking about what you might be doing differently, and how are you changing up your donor engagement? And this may be what you're thinking about or what you're currently doing. Just sharing those ideas that you're either contemplating or have been playing around and would be so helpful for others to learn from, or to bounce ideas off of. Thank you, Charnay. Charnay and I believe Kyler are here. They're our partners over at COACT who've been so fantastic. I don't know if Alondra's here as well. We've been working alongside them to bring this program to you, so thank you so much.
She is here, Carrie.
Okay. As again, you're trying to bounce through all the faces, so thank you so much for all being here. Any thoughts? Anyone have some ideas of what things they've been doing differently in terms of this space? Any Zoom, what's it called?
Someone says they're starting off their first online giving campaign and trying to reach new and younger donors.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. That's Huron River Watershed Council, so that's interesting. So it's an opportunity from what I see there. It's not just thinking through the messaging, but really reaching out to maybe a community that you might not have otherwise reached out to or had different ways of doing so. I'd be curious how that goes along. Susan took a traditional fundraising event that happens in May, turned it into a fundraising storytelling hour-long session. It was engaging and created ongoing conversations after. That's great. I'm glad to hear that, Susan. Hopefully it was, it also brought in the resources you were seeking, but it also the benefits of also bringing different people to the table and having conversations that might not just last that day, but perhaps they'll be continuing to think about you long after the event in ways that are really meaningful for connections that are really strong for the organization. Do we have one more thought about what's going on? A couple there. So UD offering up the Centering Justice series that we at NEW have offered to center the issues people of color we and are facing amid COVID-19. And Lizzie Wilson, we're just getting started to think about fundraising really while the organization is going through fundamental change. So you're at a different place now as you're contemplating your different options. So the Centering Justice series is also a way to think about linking that mission and margin, something that's really important to us, by bringing the, central point and the conversation to the community. But it is also an opportunity for us to ask for support from folks which we would otherwise not necessarily have received support from. And I might take this opportunity so we can be mindful of time and give other folks a chance. You can keep chiming in on the chat, but I'm going to turn it over to Will to talk more about some fund development ideas. So there we go. I'm going to go there. We'll keep monitoring the chat box.
Well, thank you all so much. I'm very honored to be here talking with all of you. There's a lot of familiar faces in the audience, so it's great to see all of you. So just a couple of things, I want to start off by saying, I was invited to present here, and I'm very honored to do so and to talk with you and share with y'all. It's difficult for me to consider myself an expert in this work. I have been doing it, and I'm very, immersed in it, but I have not been doing it for as long as I know many of the people on this call have been in their careers in nonprofit development. So I think that, that greenness obviously makes me a little bit naive in some ways. And I think it also provides me with fresh set of eyes and ways of kind of doing things differently. So I really appreciate y'all making space for that. The other thing that I just want to say up front is, I come from a MBA background, right? That's what my graduate degree is in. So the ways that I think about things are sometimes a little bit different, and I have the great pleasure to work with an organization that operates much like a social enterprise, right? We have a significant portion of our income is earned revenue, and the ways that we go about bringing in those kind of resources and dollars. So if something that I'm saying feels like it doesn't quite fit with your business model, like, I want to honor that. I appreciate, y'all coming and sharing those thoughts through the chat box. And I hope that we can kind of dialogue through some of those things, as I'm kind of sharing. So, one of the things that I really appreciate about this particular series is that it is an emergent series, right? We're not talking necessarily about fundraising practices that you've always engaged in, or the ways that things have been done. We're talking about this moment and how to go forward with all that's changing around us. And, similar to a lot of what Amy shared, I think that all of us have had some pretty significant shakeups because of COVID-19, right? So for New, in my role, there were some funders and foundations and donors that we had been speaking to, that we had been actively working on projects with, that I had submitted applications to, had gotten their revisions on, and then, gone back to submit. And only then, after that last submission, do I hear from somebody else, somebody higher up in their foundation hierarchy, letting me know that, oh, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to move forward with this grant after all, right? After that's like these are established relationships, folks that we've worked with for a while. And so that was pretty jarring, right? To just recognize, oh snap, like this isn't even just, just the impacts for us as individual organizations, but the ripple effect that it's having across the sector as some of our, like New, we don't do direct service. A lot of y'all on here do direct service. We support you in doing that direct service, and y'all needed resources to serve our communities right off the jump, right? And so a lot of that focus, had to be directed towards y'all. And that was important and warranted and necessary. And we had to adapt because of it, right? So that was one of the big things that really kind of hit home for me quick, was just, we're all going to be making some pretty significant pivots, right? And so that has not only shifted, the way that we looked at some of the things that we had planned earlier in this year, right? We are similarly on a end of June fiscal year, early beginning of July fiscal year type of cycle. so things that were happening and things that were changing between March and June, okay, we had to pivot there, but that also signaled to us that come August, that come December, things will likely still be different, right? And we know that a second wave is potentially coming, and we know that the economic impact of this thing is just jumping off, right? So that that really stuck with me, and it really kind of changed the framework of how I thought about, you know, how we were going to continue this. You know, speaking for us again, like NEW is one of those organizations where, because we are quote unquote behind the scenes, right? Like y'all are interacting with the community in a lot more tangible ways than we are. We haven't necessarily been that like sexy organization that people want to fund. We're not, you know, the things that they can directly see having impact in their community, right? We're not the Humane Society where, you know, where that's where the money goes, is to the puppies, and who doesn't want to give the money to the puppies, right? So traditionally, or in the time that I've been in at NEW, a lot of our focus has been on working with foundation corporate partners, right? Those folks who are able to give kind of the larger gifts, who are able to see the systems change work that we're doing, and able to kind of understand that in ways that the folks who are needing the services that a lot of direct organizations, you know, just kind of don't. So again, you know, this is all kind of like the context with which I'm kind of coming to the table today. And I also need to uplift that, you know, I am a young Black man in America right now in the moment of heated racial justice, you know, racial injustice, police brutality, and turmoil. And so that has had a lot of impact on the way that I think about my relationships and the ways that we are connecting with our donors, right? So, you know, I think that, to Amy's point, right, a lot of what we're talking about today and what I'm going to try to communicate is this need for like diversification and decentralization. And what I mean by that is, you know, like what happens when our organizations are no longer able to rely on a major gift from a partner or foundation that we've had in the past, right? Even a great relationship, turmoil has rocked them. Like, yo, we have a relationship with a foundation who's had a family foundation that told us straight up, like, our prospects have taken a tank, our assets have taken a tank because of what happened in the stock market and the economy. What happens when those relationships become jeopardized, right? Not necessarily because of y'all or anything, but because of the context and what's happening in this situation. And so a lot of what I've been thinking about has been, how do we create stability across, you know, turbulent times? Like, how do we create a ship that is stable even when the waves are rocking really intensely? And I think that a lot of that has to do with our donor relationships, and making sure that we have a good, wide, diverse pool of folks that we are connected with and kind of relying on to help us move the mission forward. So that when any one person, you know, or any one organization is facing an issue, that it doesn't become something that has a huge impact, you know, on our ability to move forward. Another thing that I think is really important about recognizing donor relationships is that they often have a lot, like with particular individuals, families, you know, they have a lot of freedom and flexibility in how they give, right? They don't necessarily have to give to a program that is strictly fit within a certain parameter that they decided, you know, 5 years ago in their strategic plan, or that their board, you know, rather communicated down to them, right? That this is where we need to focus. Like, individuals and families don't necessarily have that same constraint. And so when we're able to be in stronger partnership with them, we have stronger freedom to experiment, to do the emergent thing. And I think that that's something that particularly for us has been super critical right now, right? Like, this series is emergent, centering justice is emergent, and we could not really be able to do those things if we didn't have a nice base of unrestricted funding that allows us to try new things when we need to. And I think that that's super important, you know, not only to being able to meet our missions, but to continue to make our organizations a central part of our communities and keeping them connected to the people and the needs that we are trying to address, right? You know, individuals and families, I think one of the things that we can really try to pivot towards is trying to get this long-term support. And that's a lot of where I'm going to be focusing my time. And it's some of the conversations that I've had already about like, look, you know, and this is kind of tied to the people or people point. Look, you know, like this is our reality, right? Like the things that we are working to change, the things that we are working to address are not simple, quick, overnight fixes. And I know that everybody knows that, right? But I think that often the giving does not reflect that understanding. Often we give, you know, one-time gift because we're connected with a story, something, a moment that comes, right? And that one-time gift is super important and helps us in those moments. And what about the opportunity to say, okay, what we're doing matters, it matters to you, and it matters in the long term. So how can we take that gift and kind of stretch it into ongoing long-term support, right? I think like the conversations that I've been having have been, you know, hey, in this past year, you gave us $100, for example, or $1,000, right? How can we, in the next year, what if we were to break that up into, you know, $100 a month contributions, right? And what that does is not only even out our cash flows so that we're able to meet our concurrent, you know, expenses on a continuous basis, but it also gives us again, that continued freedom and flexibility to say, okay, you know, this is how we're approaching something this year. This is how we need to kind of look and pivot in the next year. And to be able to do that, maybe we need to better understand what's happening in the community right now. So that's one of like the real practical, quick and tactical things that I've been doing is having conversations with a lot of folks who are coming into our organization, who are attracted to what we're doing about these recurring monthly gifts, right? So that we're not in positions where we have to say, yo, I gotta lay staff off because I don't have the cash to be able to meet those obligations this month because of this other crisis that is happening external to my organization, right? So I know that we're moving a little bit on time and I'm quite verbose. So if we want to move to that next, thank you, Carrie. So along those lines of, you know, diversifying and decentralizing our funding, right? One of the ways that we can do that is by decentralizing our fundraising, y'all. Like y'all, I know that most of you are executive directors. I'm not speaking to a lot of fund development folks. So I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial. What would it do for your organization if you didn't have to pay somebody like me to fundraise for you? What would it do for your organization if you were able to redirect my salary, or, you know, whoever your fund development director's salary, a portion of their salary to your programs, right? By working with donors to create long-term, you know, recurring gifts, you kind of take some of that burden of needing to go out and file for applications and meet new donors and all that jazz that, you know, folks like me spend our time doing. That could be redirected. And we can do that by decentralizing our fundraising efforts. And what I mean by that is, like, how do you spend your free time, right? What are some of the things that you do? I mean, we asked this question about what are some of the things that you've had to do? What is one thing that you've done over the pandemic that you never thought you'd do? Because a lot of those have been instances of creativity, of new ways to approach something that you needed that you weren't necessarily like getting in the old way, right? And those things are potentially replicable amongst our community. So for example, right, I participated in a virtual 5K. What is a virtual 5K? Everybody, right, agreed ahead of time, hey, I'm gonna do this 5K, signing up $5 on their own time on a certain day. They went out, used their little app on their phone, ran their race, sent the person their time, right? And then there was like an easy leaderboard, like a Google Sheet that was just updated throughout the day so folks knew, oh, this is the time to beat or what have you, right? That event raised $800. It took the person who was doing it an hour to put together, and it didn't cost them anything. They didn't have to buy any new software. They didn't have to, put together a whole, they were able to do this using the folks in their sphere, folks who they were connected to, like the mission of what they were raising money for, but got them engaged in doing something a little bit differently, right? Another example, I write poetry sometimes, and in the wake of George Floyd's killing, I wrote a bunch of poetry related to racial injustice, my feelings. My team at New was gracious enough to let me do a reading of that poetry through our platform. So for the organization, how much time did it take? It took me, like 15 minutes to get the Facebook event set up, right? We shared about the communications in our newsletter, so nothing extra, nothing that we weren't already going to be doing. And then on my own time, right, as kind of a volunteer, because I'm a person in the community who's tied to this work, I did my reading, took a half an hour, raised $6,200, and got donors. I have a donor list now from folks literally all over the country, folks in Texas, Connecticut, Illinois, people that I don't know, but who are, connected to what we're trying to do, right? So.
Well, let me share something there if I could that I think is really important. Two things that I would want leaders to think about. One is when Will is having yes in our heart. So when Will came with this emergent idea, it was something we'd never done. It felt new and unique, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't like the shiny object syndrome, right? And what I was able to anchor in is the alignment to our values. And I think that's important. And I think each of us, as we're navigating fundraising, need to recognize, first of all, we have 4 generations of donors right now, and they all want to engage in a different way. And we are at a particular time in our country where people are giving from from their values. And so the alignment that Will was able to bring had to do both with our values and those 80 donors' values. And I think we're going to see that trend going forward, and it's something to think about. I don't think of New as an advocacy organization, but certainly the thing that's drawing folks to our work right now is sort of our radical candor about racial injustice, and the fact that we'd had a number of programs leading up to this moment that were focused on racial justice. So while it was emergent and we said yes in the moment, I think it's important to know that really what Will was doing was tied to our values, and that the donor value equation was certainly a factor in your success, Will.
Yeah, so, I know that I'm at time. So just want to reiterate these ideas that first, like people are people, right? This opportunity, this moment gives us a chance to connect with each other vulnerably and on a real level that we haven't necessarily had before. So when I'm having these conversations about why monthly giving is so important to us right now, like people are able to understand and connect with that. Because, like Yodit was saying, it's tied to our values and it's tied to the value that they see in the community. So tactically, again, I just want to invite you all to start having conversations with the folks on your team about what things that they do, that they like to do, that you can connect to your mission and values, that can become ways of fundraising, ways of bringing people in. And these are, again, things that, don't have to take a lot of time and energy and resource, right? They don't have to be huge events. This moment has really humanized, the informal, right? Folks are used to getting on Zoom and seeing things differently. They don't necessarily need a gala right now. So just want to invite y'all to think about those opportunities. Think about the ways that you can get your team, your volunteers, your donors even to become other fundraisers for you by engaging in these ways. Be creative, be a little bit daring. And I know I'm on time, so I would be happy to talk to y'all, any of you, more about some of the things that we've got in the works.
So thank you so much, Will. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate everyone also chiming in on the chat box. So the question we have here is, what might you do differently with your donors? And when was the last time you evaluated or thought about donor engagement? And so I'm gonna open that up for just a few moments if folks are thinking, just one, as you're chiming into the chat box, I know I have a friend of mine who did a virtual storytelling event for a fundraiser and was surprised and delighted to find they actually surpassed their expected, the dollar amount that they thought they were going to bring in, because they were able to tap into a much wider audience, friends and family that live out of town and people who care about it and told their folks about it. Other folks were able to engage. So it's an opportunity. It's not just, we're not just trying to replicate what we've done, but really think differently. Judith offered off, there's also a tendency to contort our work and our missions to accommodate what the donors want to support. But now she really reminds us the opportunities to think about leading rather than being led, and evoking radical candor with them about the real issues. For you as an organization, what really matters to you, and thinking about how you can bring that message to the community that will care and will want to support that through this space. And thank you. And Charnay also reminded us and trying to get us to think about those questions that we have here. There's some thoughts that folks have about what you might do differently, and when the last time you have actually evaluated or thought about donor engagement. And hey, Will, too, I also was thinking as you're talking about the creativity, not just of your staff, but that full team. If we think back to what Amy posted about all those folks in our network, it's your board, it's your donors, your funders, it's the broader community, your volunteers. Those folks too might also have ideas about thinking creatively about how you can support your organization.
And like, they have talents to bring to the table. It's not necessarily even that they have to, that you always have to be the one to execute these things, right? My buddy is doing a concert for us tonight, and he is donating part of the proceeds from the concert. I'm not doing anything for that. So there's ways to connect and to really leverage and bring folks in the community into the work.
Yeah.
I also think, and I was just kind of reading through some of the chat, is that this is, quote unquote, the time to be doing some of this work, because if you think about pre-pandemic, we were just doing the work to get the work done. And so we can now spend a little bit time in the space that we wouldn't necessarily have the time to do before. And although there might still be a sense of urgency on behalf of the organization because they're from a financial perspective, I mean, I think taking this blessing to spend that time in this space and be able to be creative and pivoting, I guess I'd throw it out there. When would you ever have that kind of time forced upon you, right? This is forced upon all of us. It wasn't like, I'm gonna go offline and find my creative juices. I just put that out there for organizations to think about, because if you're right now in this, I am on a crisis mode thinking, the creativity is not going to come through, right? And so if you're always on that crisis, like, I'm trying to stop the bleeding of what my organization is doing right now, what Will and I are saying is not going to resonate to how you want to interface with your donors.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy, for that forced creativity. I really think that's a fun way of putting it. I'm going to launch a poll, folks. I'm going to just put this out here, and you'll see it pop up on your screen. So I want to, oh goodness, if I launch it, I cannot. Oh, I can. I want to keep us moving through this, but I want to ask people, as we're coming towards the end of this session, before we jump off, we do want to get some feedback as we're moving into, this is the last of our series, but we are thinking about opportunities for the future alongside our partners in COAX. So it really helps us to understand what you think about what we've had to offer and how we want to think about whether and how we might bring it back to us all in the fall. So that's up on your screen. As we go forward though, and before we conclude this here, I just want to offer up these questions. What comes to mind in terms of next steps too? We're curious about, from this fund development discussion, what resonated with you? What are some ideas, behaviors, things you might take away and might give some thought? As I mentioned at the beginning, really a part of the purpose of this was trying to go towards actionable items. So we'd be really curious to hear what action you might take as a result of the discussion today, or at least explore. Lots of people have here. I have that, those questions, what resonated with you? So Rebecca offers up the idea of cultivating new responses, new prospects in this space. I'm also going to offer up this opportunity for folks to type questions into the chat box. If there's anything that you've wanted to ask along this time that you haven't had an opportunity to do so. Coming at you fast and furious here, folks. Awesome. So Rebecca mentions this is an idea, an opportunity for cultivating new prospects. And it's not simply just coming back on folks that you've had before. And Yodit reminds us to be courageous when talking with donors in the community. Susan offers up different industries are going to be impacted for different lengths of time. And as you think about your financial viability, how far out are you planning? Our board asked us to show how we can sustain through summer 2022. That's a long time. How do folks feel about that? That is a long time to predict the future. Is that a common thing? I'm seeing a couple heads nodding. Are you getting that also this pressure from your boards to plan out that far away? I agree, Yodit. It seems like a long time. We can hardly figure out whether our kids are going to be back in school in the fall, let alone. So Ebony says, resonate with me, investigate more of the 4 generations of donors, segment out our donors, and craft values questions. Yodit identifies building reserves as a way to try to address that long-term sustainability, which can be hard. Susan mentioned with COVID, the assumption is museums, particularly hands-ons, may not be able to open with full numbers to them. And I think you raise up an interesting point, Susan, that there are different things that are happening within different parts of our nonprofit sector that impact us in all different ways, which require us to be creative and to think differently. Thank you for keeping those chats going. I want to also provide an opportunity and open up to my colleagues at COAC to just uplift some of their upcoming events and sessions as the comments come into the chat box. Shirley, would you like to offer up?
Thanks so much, Carrie. Thank you so much to our new partners. It's always been a pleasure working with you all. Just a few upcoming events. So like on the first one, A New Way Forward, Reimagining the Nonprofit Workplace Virtual Engagement Series. We invite you all to join us this Friday as we kick off this wonderful series with some of our partners at M&A, MCR, and the Council of Michigan Foundations. This session will feature legal guidance to consider in developing a reentry plan, and will feature wonderful speakers from various organizations. So definitely please come and be a part of the conversation. We have the information on our website where you can register. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us at COAC and just go on our website for more details. And on the next slide, we're actually going to be working with Culture Source and having a discussion on coping with grief collectively and creatively. We're going to have a seasoned psychologist as well as a local art therapist really come and talk about grief and just using art therapy as a tool to heal and really explore that. So we definitely invite you as well to go on our website to get more information. And finally, our CoLab Connect program. We host free one-on-one appointments for around 45 minutes with different subject matter experts for nonprofit leaders to really discuss challenges and co-create solutions. We're actually going to be working with Phoenix Innovate and CCS and have some specifically revolving around fundraising this month, either Tuesdays and Thursdays. Last Thursdays, I know that they will be available, and then on some Tuesdays as well. So please just check on our website to schedule an appointment to get more information. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to COAC. Thank you.
Wonderful. It's so important that we have opportunities to work with great partners such as the folks down at COACT, and to bring this to the broader audience and community of nonprofit leaders. So as I said, we're going to take the summer off. We're going to respond to the evaluation surveys that you provide. So we have this quick poll within the survey, within this, and we'll also follow up with an online survey if just to get additional questions answered. And we really do appreciate your feedback. It informs how we make our decisions. So that will be coming to you via email as well. And we'll follow up with a resource document with additional materials to help you as you're thinking through your fund development opportunities. So be on the lookout for that. I would like to, in terms of couldn't hurt to ask, is what I've been learning today. So if you found sessions such as this one valuable, that we do ask and encourage you to visit our website, news donation page at new.org/donate. Any questions, any thoughts? Thank you to our partners, and thank you all for being here. We'll stick around for a couple minutes if you want to ask additional questions. Otherwise, thank you. Have a wonderful day, and we look forward to connecting with you, hopefully back again in the fall. Thank you, Amy and Will, by the way.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you again. It's been fun. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. I'm gonna stop the share. Good. Thank you. Wonderful job, Amy and
Thank you,
Will.
Amy. Thank you for joining us, Amy and Will. Appreciate you being here.
Appreciate it so very
Thank
much.
you. It was great. Thank you.
Right.
Have a good day.
Thank
as well.
you. I gotta figure out how to save these poll results. Okay. I'll do that before I get off. Bye.
See you in a little bit.
Sounds good. Oh, that's not it.
Oh, that was the pool?
That is the poll. You can see it. I'm just trying to
Oh.
figure out what do I do with it. How do I save it for ours? I guess I can just do a screenshot. I don't really know. Oh, that's not gonna work. Okay. I'll just take a picture with my camera.
Okay, 70% very satisfied. Now I know this is like my first time, you know, with like presenting with this kind of eval or
Yeah.
presenting content, I guess. So now I completely understand why y'all were always like, hey, Will, do you have those evaluations? Like that. I get it.
This is so helpful though. This is an interesting way. We're getting far more responses doing it this way than, what's it called? Than just the SurveyMonkey. I think it's easier.
Oh, really? Yeah, just because folks are here.
Yeah. All right. So I wonder if I can get these results again, but now I've taken pictures at least. So, okay. All right. I'm going to jump off. Thank you. It was fantastic. I appreciate it. All right. Bye.